what is this picture that we've painted of Jesus all these centuries and decades? This is not right.
Logan Sekulow sits down with Sonny Sandoval, the frontman of P.O.D. and the author of the new book, Son of Southtown, My Life Between Two Worlds. Available everywhere books are sold.
I'm excited to chat with you, Sonny. I just finished your book and I listened to it and I thought it was amazing. As a kid who grew up in the era of P.O.D. really taking off, Southtown, Maitland Avenue, these are words that I almost, in a weird way, before hearing this book, I think I treated it like, almost like a fictional place. I treated it like the punk rock Mayberry, or something, like in my head, it was, I think of it, or the Mos Eisley Cantina of, this area. But this book, I actually get to feel it. And you have to say, you did a great job expressing it even before in the songs, because it does feel like it matched up a lot of what, the suburban kids were listening, going, oh man, yeah, this is what we're like at Southtown. And, it never, you were able to do that, but it feels like a place to grow up that was, it was a bit rough, but it was also, it was a filled with love community.
Yeah, 100%, man. Thank you for saying that. Makes me feel good. But yeah, I've always wanted to highlight, and I still do. I still highlight my neighborhood, the city I'm from. I'm super proud of my community and the people, and it's made us who we are, So that's a good thing. I didn't want to come across even to my boys. Like if anything you read about, even with Marcos, it's like there's a lot of things he taught me, even through this whole process, still continues to teach me, so I'm not that big brother know-it-all kind of, that's what I'm trying to say too. It's like, I don't have this figured out. And even though I've been walking with God for so long, this isn't a how to do faith or how to do Christianity, in 5 steps type of thing. It's just highlighting my life, and it is personal. It's vulnerable. But I'm trying to encourage people that anybody could do it. And, this be careful in this world. It's out to get you.
You brought up your faith. Obviously, this is CCM Magazine. It's a part of what we do here. But what I really loved is I almost could settle in after the first chapter, because the generation I grew up in, you could put sort of that punk alternative tooth and nail kind of generation. A lot of those artists, got chewed up, spit out, and sometimes a lot of the stories have lost their faith, are no longer practicing, or no longer Christians, and what I liked was immediately in the first chapter, I was able to settle in and go, okay, I don't know much about Sonny, but I can tell you that by the end of this chapter, he's still a guy who's still holding his faith very seriously. It maybe has evolved through the years, as everyone's does. But to see that you're still passionate about maybe what was the mission of P.O.D. in the first place for you, even if it wasn't necessarily always lined up with the other guys, there was something about it as someone who is still strong in his faith to go, okay, we still have some people out there who not only believed what they were saying when they were 18 and 19 and 20, and when you look at those timelines, but you're still there today. I don't want to say like what makes that different for you, or what has maintained that faith, but how have you been able to maintain that faith when I feel like a lot of our generation has lost?
That's all glory to God. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm not Superman. And I think that's the thing with P.O.D. is like, once we started to be the poster child for Christianity, and perfection and all this stuff, it was like, that was too much to bear. And that's what jaded us all. You know what I mean? We're like, dude, I can't be who you want me to be, but for me and just personally, it's like, and I always say this, man, I had an encounter with the Almighty God. So it's like, and I don't say that to be, I'm so spiritual and I talked to God and God told me all that stuff. It's not that. I say, no, dude, this is my story. Look where I'm from. But it's those inner convictions, it's like I had an encounter with God that was real. And so I don't live my life always asking God for proof if God's real, oh, hey, God, show me or do this, or I don't need constant, this fish on a line type of thing with God. I know God is real. I know he exists. And I love him, and I know that he loves me, and my relationship with him is real. So no one's going to tell me anything different. I'll listen to you, and I'd love to have conversation with you, but I know who my God is. And that's, I mean, first of all, I know it'll work for everybody. I know that, but I can't force nothing on you. All I can do is love you and be real. And so it's undeniable. It doesn't matter. So whatever I go through, it might hurt. It might be sad. It might be tragic, but I still look back and I'm like, oh God, you've been good to me. And you are good. And even though today is rough, like that's not gonna make me waver, or that's not gonna make me question who you are. And I think sometimes that's with people in their faith. They want a genie in a bottle. It's not like that, man. It's like that's not the God of the Bible. And so we have to really know exactly who he is.
That word undeniable you just said, it also comes up a lot in the book. I even have it listed on my notes here, something to bring up here, because it kind of rings throughout the book that there was also the undeniable, mission of P.O.D. and of Sonny, but also that the music had to be incredible. The music had to be undeniable. For if you were not
100%.
part of it, if you were listening, it wasn't that. Because we grew up in an era, and look, I think it's crazy because we're not all that far apart in age, but I look at it and go, I was like a kid, and you guys I'm like looking up to as these like, grown men adults. And I start thinking about it. Yeah, I was like, well, I was 11, but they were like 19. It wasn't like they were talking about.
What's the difference now?
Right now, it's no different. But at the time, it was like this moment. But the music, because you brought up that one of my favorite parts in the book, and I can remember it clear as day, of walking into the Christian bookstore on the day Southtown came out and Fundamental came out, and it having that label that said, if you like Rage Against the Machine, you're going to love this album. And then the next one was an Audio Adrenaline record. It said, if you love the Spin Doctors, you're going to love Audio Adrenaline. And I've had that seared in my brain now for like 30 years. And even then, as a kid, I kind of felt like, well, that's not where we should be going here. But then you even mentioned early in the book that you're like, you refer to yourself as new metal. And you're like, I'm one of the, you may think of Sonny as this new metal singer. And I turned to my wife after I was listening. I go, did you think of P.O.D. as new metal? Like, I'm a new metal fan. That's the area I grew up in. And she's like, no. She's like, I never did. She's like, but also I wouldn't even know how to describe P.O.D. if I was asked. It really sort of defined a genre, but also broke so many barriers. And we go back to that word undeniable. That seems to be the key to the success.
Yeah. We've been hustling and going forward. We're a blue collar working band. It's always been that way. And everything about P.O.D. is always been authentic, and it's been real. It's where we come from. There wasn't, when we were doing this music, it was no such thing as new metal. People were referring to us as rapcore, or they compared us to Body Count, and out of their own ignorance, they just saw black guys in a band. It's like, no, that was a punk band, but Ice-T is a rapper, so they were confusing the lines of that. And then obviously in whatever pop culture, Rage Against the Machine gets popular, and it's like, oh, you guys kind of sound like Rage Against the Machine. Oh, you guys kind of sound like Limp Bizkit. And say, okay, but like is this? Yeah. But this was our lifestyle, and I think that's why once we got called new metal, it was like, okay, we didn't really embrace it because it was like you'll have a new name for it like in 2 months from now. So we never embraced that, and new metal stuck. So again, we don't have a problem with it. We're like, cool, whatever. It doesn't matter. This is P.O.D. We know that we're pioneers in this game, but it wasn't even for that. It was just us being ourselves. And even in our faith, it's us being ourselves, not saying we got it figured out. We were just kids trying to learn what this faith is about, to learn who God is. And but then all of a sudden we got pushed into rock and roll, and you get jaded and you get different views and philosophies, and realize that not everybody is in our little bubble, in our box around the world, and that there are Christians around the world that we are different. We do think differently, but the one constant is that we believe in that Jesus Christ was God, and he died on the cross for our sin, and we have salvation through him. That's it. We might not ever get along or agree, but we can agree on that. And so it's just us being us, man.
Yeah, and with you guys being you, and knowing again the diversity that was in the band that's in the band, and the look, and when you watch the video for Southtown and you see that, And then I was curious from your point of view, then you go around you talked about going to Cornerstone. If you go to these concerts, the first concert I saw was in Atlanta. It wasn't it was a lot of suburban kids coming out to see P.O.D. Did it feel weird that that's who was gravitating to your music? And like, I couldn't necessarily relate
100%.
in that way, but for some reason it connected, and it connected with like everyone that I was surrounded by, though we were certainly not, and put in no way and want to say like, oh yeah, I'm a kid of the streets. It's like, no, I'm a kid of the suburbs of Atlanta,
I get it.
Spending time in Orlando,
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're a rock and roll band. And then when you look, even now, you look at from, East Coast to West Coast, you can put certain stereotypes. You can put certain, hey, this is these are people that listen to this kind of music. These people listen to this kind of music. And for us, we come from a melting pot. And so everybody just thinks, oh, you guys listen to gangster rap and you guys listen to, this kind of music. And I was saying this on another interview, because we were being authentically ourselves. What really shook things up for us was when we were on MTV, and all of a sudden now you have these kids from Tulsa, you have these kids from Iowa that are watching MTV because they're watching Britney Spears and NSYNC or whatever, and all of a sudden they're seeing a whole different culture they've never seen before. And this is before the cell phones and all that stuff. And all of a sudden they're seeing guys that are like, wait a minute, they're covered in tattoos. They have these lowrider culture. They're mixing music together. It's like, this is cool. And that was the beginning for people to see a different side of us. And then all of a sudden, that's mainstream. That's mainstream. And then we're so used to rock and underground. And then now we're like, man, we're on a mainstream platform. And then we're doing shows, because before MTV and all that stuff, it was more people that were like-minded. It was more people that were kind of in the know, but that's what we call the underground.
Right.
It's not mainstream. And now we're mainstream, and you got like, dude, there's like, pop kids, and there's different, they like Blink-182, or whatever. It's like, they're coming to see, what are these dudes all about? And it's always been a beautiful thing.
But it also ties into what you guys were growing up listening to. And, one of the references in it is like, your mom and a connection to something like Frampton Comes Alive, or some of these influences that were not where you'd think the P.O.D. Backbone is. But when you start thinking about the melodies and the things you brought out, even the unique guitar sound that came from your team, and you knew it immediately, much like Peter Frampton, you knew it immediately. Your influences, like you said, you're not only listening to gangster rap and hardcore hip hop, or even hardcore. You guys were growing up with parents who were raised in the 60s and 70s, and that kind of, you can feel it seep in.
Yeah. And I mean, credit to where we come from. We come from a culture that has so many different flavors. And that's why even today, sometimes, I always kind of reference it like a gumbo. There's 1,000 spices in this meal. And when you're like, this is the most incredible meal, most incredible gumbo because of the flavors and spices, but you drop that off in the middle of Kansas, they're like, I don't know, man. They're picking it apart. They're like, hey, just give me a hot dog. I'm cool with that. And we think this is amazing. But at today, sometimes people just want what they want. But for us, it was normal to, drive down the street and somebody's playing rap, somebody's playing mariachi music, somebody's playing metal. There are Mexican guys in my neighborhood with long hair when they're rocking death metal shirts. You're like, it was normal for us. Whereas everybody outside of our culture thinks that, no, everybody's stuck in their world and everybody sticks to what they know. And that's not the case. And so as many beautiful cultures and people we have in our neighborhood, it was natural for us to blend. It was never contrived. It was never forced. But number one is because we're fans of music, all kinds and types of music.
Did Christian music play any part of that in your life growing up, or was it just something you guys more developed your faith and therefore that became what you wanted to talk about? Because I'm just curious, because there's not a lot. I mean, obviously this is CCM Magazine, as I said, but the influences, I'm not sure with P.O.D. where that could have come from.
No. When I didn't know that there was a Christian music, I still don't like those labels, because I don't think that it's a it is a positive thing. It's like you said, it's like, if you like Rage Against the Machine, it's like, you'll like P.O.D. It's like, you're already putting us in a whack class.
Yeah.
You're saying because we're Christians, not as good, and you have to settle for this.
Yeah.
Where I write about it in the book, it's like, before you have some of the most amazing pieces of art and music that all came from people that claim to be inspired by God and to be believers. But now, because we put it in this, what we think is moral, what we think is holy and righteous, and we put it in a box, and the rest of the world is like, it doesn't make sense to them.
Yeah, and there was a shift. And I think you brought that up. There was some point, there was a shift that all of a sudden the young and creative that were trying to create music that was glorifying God got sort of pushed out, and we're like, no, this isn't what we want. But now I have to say, because my kids are bringing me music and they're like listening, and again, it's almost like it's become undemocratized, where they go, hey, my son will listen to something that I grew up on, and he'll bring me Eminem, and he'll bring me whatever, and then all of a sudden he's bringing me Christian artists that I don't even know if he knows or cares that has happened, whether it's Forrest Frank or whoever it may be, or a lot of what's going on in Christian hip hop. And I go, oh, this is sort of the power of the internet and of social media, where it's no longer, maybe there is this moment now that could happen in what you'd say, quote unquote, Christian music, to where it is treated in somewhat the same. And that's part of what our mission is too, is to say, no, there's amazing stuff happening. You just have to keep your eyes on what's going on. And
there's
not treat it that way.
Stuff.
And not treat it that way where it's like whatever is on radio is 100% always what it's going to be. You have kids now being able to discover music in a way that we were not necessarily able to.
Yeah, there's always been amazing stuff, but because you put it into a label and a category, again, you're speaking amongst a Christian subculture that the world they don't know what we're saying, dude. They don't know what we're talking about. They're just being excellent. Why can't you just be excellent in anything you do? Whether it doesn't have to be art or music, whether it's just your life, your career, everything, and then shine your light.
Yeah.
But we've always put ourselves into a box, but I also believe that God did use P.O.D. to kind of break down a lot of those stereotypes, because we went in and we always knew that we had to be 10 times better than the band that we're playing with, the secular band that we're playing with, because the moment they found out we were Christians, they're like, they're not going to be that good. They're not as talented. They're not all these things. But we knew we had to be undeniable, like we said, so that they could sit back and be like, what are you going to say after you see, like, I don't believe in God, or I'm not into that whole churchy Christian stuff, but those dudes, they killed it. Yeah. They can't say nothing, bro.
And as a kid, though, that did grow up in the church and grew up in Christianity, there was also something to be said about P.O.D. coming out there, being strong about their faith, but also, like you said, we looked cool. The music was good. It wasn't just like I had to listen to it because it was Christian or not. It's like, no, even in the early days, and I know you bring up, and we go back to Stuff the Punk, you bring up those early days, which a lot of us were there. I mean, that's the thing, is that a lot of us were listening to P.O.D., at Snuff the Punk or Brown or any of those before it hit. And I wanted to tell you, though, that as a kid who had those same beliefs, had those same values, there was something that was very validating about someone who was cool, who was out there saying this and was proud and loud about it. And though it may not be how we talk in our 40s or in our, it may not talk as we're older, in that moment, there was nobody saying those things. And you guys were strong enough to go do it and create records that were not afraid to also, I think you said, like, if you don't, there's a lot of talk in the book about, you don't like Jesus, that's fine. Let's fight. There was that feeling. But like, even at 10 years old, I felt that going, this is important. And I'm so happy that these guys are sort of validating.
True. I understand that. I think as kids, it's like that's the whole thing. It's like you're discovering God. It's like we have so much power, and God is just so cool and all this stuff. But as the institution of church and Christianity, we haven't done that. We put ourselves in a box because you're walking on eggshells, or you don't want to offend, or you don't want to do this. for us, we didn't grow up in that. Like we found faith, or I discovered who Jesus was, and I'm like, dude, I what is this picture that we've painted of Jesus all these centuries and decades? This is not right. And because I come from the street and my neighborhood, I'm like, I'm upset. I'm angry. You know, I'm angry that they painted my Jesus to look this way, to act this way, to speak this way. That's not right. And they're mocking my king. They're mocking my God that I love. But that's when also I was just, and then I realized that, well, that's Jesus said that's what the world's gonna do. And so I'm trying to follow this path of Jesus's teachings. But we were like a gang mentality. Hey, you got a problem with like, because we would have did that for our neighborhood. We would have did that for the people we love. It doesn't matter. It's not till you start realizing, or you're understanding what the Bible says, that you're like, oh, okay, well, no, God, Jesus says turn the other cheek. Oh, okay, that's a hard one. That's a tough one. But that's my journey of faith. We're learning as we go. But we're also, I get it, where kids are like, no, dude, you're speaking up, dude. You're saying what's the truth. Or we're not all, just because I love Jesus, I'm not a dork. You know what I mean? I don't just like this music right here or this name, you know. And but in a way, that's kind of what we've been doing. I love the DC Talk boys. I love DC Talk. It's like, but that's what the kids were listening to in the church, and then so if they're going out and they're playing ball with their friends, they're like, hey, have you heard that new DC Talk album? The world is like, what? What are you talking about, dude? So you're already putting yourself in this outcast label that you're not cool, you don't know what's up, and that's not true.
Your era, there was a shift, and I think that I've seen a lot of documentaries and stuff on Christian music, and I do feel like they leave out that part, which is this underground movement that happened, whether that was in Through Tooth and Nail or for you guys. That, sure, I love those guys too. I saw Toby last week, and I think he's putting out amazing work, and probably the best work he's ever done. And I have good friends with the Audio Adrenaline people. They're like some of my closest friends. I love these guys, and I think they're doing I still think they do amazing work, and they got great hearts for the Lord.
Yes.
But there was a moment where everything changed, and I feel like you could walk in a Christian bookstore, and all of a sudden there was this new group of punk and hardcore and things that were happening in that 90s that maybe doesn't get the respect or the attention, sort of the evil era, I guess you'd say, of that sort of thing. I know you guys then said, hey, we're gonna be a little bit apart from that. But again, you're talking about a time when it's very hard now, the way Christian music is presented, to understand how radical that underground movement was. I mean, I was looking it up because I was like, when did the first time I see P.O.D? And I remember this so vividly because I was young. I was like 9 years old, and Brown had just come out, or maybe was about to come out. And it was me and my older brother, who was much more, cool and punk rock than I was. I was 9 years old. And we're in this little club outside of Atlanta that was like Christian friendly. I think, it wasn't like, they never said we're a Christian club, but it was like, definitely was, and like you said, there's like a double dragon in the back, and that's about it.
Was it the Pterodactyl?
Pterodactyl Club. The Pterodactyl Club. Oh man, I'm so happy you said that. Like, that brings my heart so much like warmth. And I was there, and I remember seeing you guys, and there was a point where even at 9, which I had seen 5 Iron MX PX, all these bands coming out of there, and then P.O.D. was so loud, I remember at 9 years old, that my dad was with us, because of course, your family was always with you at these shows, like, I think we need to, like, come, let your brother stay, we'll come back later. And we went across the street to the Dollar Theater and saw the Hunchback of Notre Dame. So that's where I was, that's what was happening at the Dollar Theater. I don't think there are Dollar Theaters anymore. But it sounds crazy when you think about the people who've been with you for so long, and you talk about the Warriors, but we felt that way. Unlike a band who felt like, you would say, the MTV success, maybe you'd go, oh, this is like, this band's selling out, they're not what we were. No, I was so excited when Southtown hit. I was so excited when Alive hit. Because again, it was like part of me was shown could work and could be there and could do as good a work. And I remember later on in my career standing in that standing in the room where they shoot TRL. So I went to a TRL and worked upstairs and going, wow, this is where all those bands were. This is where this moment happened. I think they're still doing TRL, but it was the later years. and understanding that like you guys had broken down a real door that maybe had happened for Stryper, in the same kind of idea that Stryper had this fan base that was dialing MTV and would make them be again undeniable, that then 10, 15, 20 years later, you guys would do it again. And somehow it's still, and I also think it was some of your best work. I think going from Southtown, or going from Brown to Southtown to Satellite was like, it was this, wow, again, you may say, people could maybe have said, well, it's not what the original sound was, but there was no doubt that this was your best work at that moment.
100%, man. And I love the Stryper boys, all that stuff. It's like they were that for that era. You know what I mean? But when P.O.D. and now music was changing, it was more about a lifestyle stuff. And that's why it was more authentic and organic to do that, to just be ourselves, and people were accepting it. And I do believe that God used P.O.D. to kind of mash down those walls, because the world was saying, oh yeah, but that's Christian, or that's Christian music. No, there's so many hardcore and punk rock bands that are coming up that they're just like us. They're not trying to tell you how to live your life. They're not trying to say we're better than you. They're expressing what they're going through, and the music is good, but they're not getting the chance to do that. And even the labels treated us that way, because they knew we were open about our faith. So it wasn't like they were investing in that much to us. They weren't supporting our message. But then all of a sudden, when we sell 1 million records, it's like, it became about money. And then they tapped into that. It's like, oh, and then it's like, hey, do you know any other bands that are kind of like you guys? And they just want to make money now. It's not like they want to support the message, but because God used P.O.D. to break that down, and all of a sudden bands start coming in, and then the world it becomes undeniable. Like, no, this band is actually pretty good, and they sound great. And so it opened up this door for a lot of people that were of the same, faith and had the same beliefs, to acknowledge their music.
And it came out at a time that was so, I'll never forget. I mean, you can tie all these dates. I don't remember most bands. I mean, I love music tremendously, but I don't remember most bands' release dates. But Satellite comes out, and so I went to a school in Orlando. This is crazy. I was in college, very young, where the school's 24 hours. She went to school you had classes at 9 p.m. to 1 a.m., 1 a.m. to 5. It was nuts. But it was like an art school. So I remember after one of those classes, I think it was 1 a.m. on September 11th, I walked into a Walmart or something like that, and I bought Satellite because we were all waiting for it. Alive had hit. We were all so excited. And then we went back to class, and I remember from 5 a.m. to 8 a.m. or so on September 11th, we're listening to Satellite. And my crew, again, at school, these were not Christian kids, a lot of them, but they all had heard Alive, and they had all connected. Of course, a few hours later, the world changes. I called my best friend who was in the studio. I called him and I said, "Where are you? What are you doing? Like, if you pay attention, what's happening?" And he said, "I'm at the mall buying Satellite." So I'll never forget that those things were combined, that you had maybe the biggest moment of your career happen with one of the biggest tragedies in our lifetime. But somehow the music of that album just fit perfectly for the emotions we were all going through, whether that was anger, whether that was grief, or whether that was celebration or strength, or even, kind of became the soundtrack of wartime in some ways. When you think back about that, you talk about it a bit in the book, but that is just wild. That to me, when people ask me, and it's sort of become a weird, sick joke. People ask like, "Where were you on, September 11th?" I'm always like, I was listening to the P.O.D. Satellite record. I went to go buy it before it even happened. And I don't know if that it's part of history.
Yeah. Well, again, when you have faith, it's, that God is in the details, and it's not that God caused this tragedy or did all that stuff, but he knew that it was going to happen. And it's like, to think that God can orchestrate certain things is always mind blowing to me, and that we could be a part of like his awesome plan. And here we are. We just came off a record that sold 1 million albums, and that wasn't 1 million Christians plus, that was people that were paying attention to P.O.D. We had our Alive is number 1 on MTV's Total Request, the biggest TV video show in the world, all over the world. And then we're number one at radio. We're just like, this is nuts. Our band is taking off. This is crazy. And then, we did a signing the night before, just like you said. And so we're so excited, 9/11, everybody's excited. We're so happy and proud of this record. And then we're getting ready to wake up after our signing that we were up. We slept 2 hours, and then we're going to go to play a release show in LA, Hollywood. All of a sudden, we're getting the call, and it's like our record release didn't matter anymore. We were there just like everybody else. What is going on? Praying, Lord, what's going on? Just, oh my goodness. And then all of a sudden, here's Alive that's already working in the hearts of people. And so then even the radio stations, the industry shut down. They shut down music because rightfully so. This was the pinnacle. We needed to be paying attention to what's going on to the world. But here they stopped music that now was rock and roll. They had the sex, drugs, and rock and roll. They had the negative stuff. Nobody wanted that for us. We're just a small secret. Nobody wanted to be entertained anymore. They were like, life is, the world is ending. What's going on? And everybody's looking for, needed hope. And they're looking for meaning for 2 seconds of their lives, And here's P.O.D. saying, dude, I'm so grateful to be alive. God is good. He's undeniable. And all of a sudden people are like coming to P.O.D. to, the answers. We were one of, I think, like 5 groups that they allowed to actually call in to MTV and give some kind of hope or, to speak to the people. And that's incredible. And I think after it was all said and done, the most thing that we're proud of is that, again, we're not shifting with the times. We're not shifting with the trends. The most thing that we were proud of is that, no, we wrote that song beforehand. We didn't know that this was going to happen, but that was always our intention. Let's give people hope. Let's give them love. Like, let's let them know that it's going to be okay tomorrow, And all of a sudden now the world is in chaos. And here's little P.O.D. with their songs saying, I'm so grateful to be alive.
Yeah. And
God is cool that way.
Yeah. I mean, it's such an amazing story. And this book is full of those. And I don't want to paint like a doom and gloom picture for this book because it does have that hope. And look, as ridiculous stories as well, where you're somehow living in Pauly Shore's house and, it's getting crazy. But it's a really great read. It's a great listen. And I want to encourage people, obviously, to go and check it out because that's why you're here is to promote this book. Mm-hmm. But also, and I'll put the graphics up to Southtown. But also P.O.D. continues, the music continues. And I think that's great too, is knowing that going in a little bit, is knowing how you guys are still out there, how there's still records being made, and knowing that now I get to pass this music also down to my kids. And you have seen a push, and look, you could see it with Limp Bizkit, you can see it with Creed even, and those, that sort of the music of that generation is now resonating again. And you're selling out big crowds. And I'm looking at some of these videos that you're playing in some of these festivals, especially outside the country, where it seems like rock is still very much alive.
Yes,
and maybe we need to keep our eyes, look to Europe maybe, or look to South America, because it feels like where we have maybe lost rock a little bit here in this country, it is still massive in other places.
Oh, yeah. They've been so good to us, man. And again, it's just different thinking. They appreciate American music, and a lot of these countries aren't so closed-minded as we are. Where they're putting us into categories. Well, it's Christian, or it's this, or it's that. It's like, no, they just like rock and roll music, and they're coming out to have a good time and to celebrate with us. And so it continues, man. I think we wrote one of our best records, with Veritas, and we're touring it. We're leaving here in a couple weeks to support Godsmack, and with Johnny Poole, we'll be in Europe for a month. And so nothing's changed. We love playing music. We love connecting with people. And I'm grateful to be living out my faith. I don't hide that, but I also understand that some people just want us to entertain them. And, I still don't consider myself an entertainer, right? But people want to hear us. They want us to play loud. They want to have fun. They listen to our music. But I'm always there, and I'm always there just trying to offer the God that I believe, and I'm trying to give them the Jesus that I've discovered. I'm trying to live out my faith, because ultimately, I'm not in this to be a rock star. I didn't ask to do this. Like, it goes back to your first question. It's like my love for God is just, it's so real. I don't want the world not to experience it.
Well, I can't imagine a better place for us to wrap up, Sonny. I've really enjoyed talking to you and hanging out, and I hope to catch up in real life.
Forever, bro.
I know. We could keep going, but I really do love this book, and I encourage everyone to check it out. And thank you for writing it. I know that, like, for us, I did think about this. I was like, man, we're at the point where we're reading books about ourselves. I'm at the point where, like, it's history.
To see more great interviews like this, hit the subscribe button and check out the latest news at ccmmagazine.com.